From pride parades and direct action to policy reforms, the fight for LGBTIQ rights has been a cornerstone of left politics and activism for decades. Yet, despite some major wins in legal protections, the struggle for equality for queer people remains far from over. With me here in the European Parliament in Strasbourg to discuss his current work to advance LGBTIQ rights is Portuguese left MEP José Gusmão. Hi, José.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Just first of all, so you're the author of a report up for debate and vote this week here in Strasbourg about the EU's LGBTIQ+ strategy. So what is the strategy and what are the measures you're proposing to improve it?
So since 2020, we have a European LGBT strategy, which I think was formulated in reasonable terms. One of the purposes of this implementation report is to be more ambitious in a future LGBT strategy, and that's one of the objectives, to have a future LGBT strategy. And I think we've had some success in having a common text which is very broad in political terms.
Okay. I saw, just going through it, the text flags that the rise of far-right political forces has brought increased violence against LGBTIQ+ people. Could you give some examples of where that's been seen in the EU?
Well, one of the issues of this strategy and the implementation report, I think, is very strong on that, is that we first have to recognize the existence of discrimination, which is very basic but very necessary too. Now, today we have illegal discrimination and we have legal discrimination of the LGBT community, and both have to be tackled. And recognizing that this discrimination exists and that it compounds with other forms of discrimination such as poverty, gender, ethnic origin, and so on. The second issue, and this relates very strongly with the growth of the far right, has to do with hate speech and violence. Hate speech is frequently supported or defended with the idea of freedom of speech. But the fact that is that hate speech in itself has consequences, and we've seen a rise of suicide rates among the LGBT community, which is directly linked to the growth in hate speech towards the LGBT community. And also it has direct consequences in violence, both institutional violence and social violence towards the LGBT community. And one of the purposes of the implementation report is that we have the recognition of homophobic hate crimes. We want to have them added to the list of hate crimes in the European Union.
Okay.
Furthermore, we want the European Commission to promote a program of awareness in police forces and the judicial system towards hate, the consequences of hate speech and hate crimes, so that we have more active and more informed work in these two areas. I think the report establishes a clear relationship between the growth of the far right and the growth in hate and speech and hate crimes in the European Union. I can give one very close example, which is the case of Portugal. Portugal has seen quite recently a very steep rise in the Portuguese far right. And we were the fourth country in terms of welcoming people from the LGBT community, and we still are very forward in terms of LGBT rights, but we have fallen in a very short amount of time from the 4th to the 11th country in the European Union. And this is clearly related with the rise of a far-right party in Portugal with a clear homophobic speech and its connected organizations.
Yeah, okay. Just to touch on one of the major political issues right now in Europe across almost every country is the issue of housing, which has been having a disproportionate impact on LGBTIQ+ people. How can the EU counter these kind of trends, or what are you asking the EU to do on that issue?
Well, I think the housing problem is an overall problem in the European Union. It's a bigger problem in countries where you have lower wages or lower pensions, obviously. And in terms of discrimination, you have different kinds of discrimination when accessing housing. What we try to identify in the report is the specific and measurable effect of discrimination against the LGBT community, which is in many cases, again, increased by other forms of discrimination that can be that can be connected. But there is a clear and isolated and measurable effect of belonging to the LGBT community and being discriminated in access to housing. Right. Aside from all the social problems that are also related with the LGBT community. And so we think that it's important, it's one of the most important aspects that we introduce in this report is that weaknesses in public policies affect everybody, but they affect in a different way communities that are already the object of discrimination in society at large, because public policies are supposed to protect those communities. And this is true for, obviously, for poor people, for women, it's for racialized people, and it's also true for the LGBT community. And it's something that has to be explicitly tackled in housing policies.
Okay. Let's talk about the vote then that's happening down here in Strasbourg. There seem to be two major kind of outstanding issues. The first is on free and public access to healthcare services. Correct me if I've gotten the wording wrong or right there. And the other being conversion therapy. First on the healthcare, what's going on there?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, there was it was one issue that we, maybe because we were naive, we weren't expecting to be a contentious one. The report recognizes the importance of healthcare for the LGBT community, both healthcare at large and also mental health, because it's a community that also with the rise of hate speech and hate crimes is extremely vulnerable to issues related to mental health. And so it's very important to have good public services and especially a good and functioning healthcare services. So we stated the importance of having universal and free public healthcare service, and the public and the free were controversial. And there was an amendment by Renew, the Liberals, and EPP, the Right, to replace that by affordable. Now, it's very important to understand that discrimination against the LGBT community, as I said, grows when you add in other factors of discrimination, such as poverty. Yeah. So when we say that we need affordable health care, this can mean a bunch of different things. And we know that in many member states we have policies that are privatizing healthcare and are making healthcare more expensive for families. This means that the LGBT community is directly affected because these policies are going to hurt their access to healthcare, which is in many cases emergency access to healthcare. So we're going to try to reverse this amendment, which I think is very harmful for what it is a very good report in terms of underlying the importance of public services for the LGBT community, and we're going to try and get that back.
Okay. The other one I was going to raise with you was conversion therapy. What are the chances we can finally eradicate this barbaric practice, at least in Europe? Well,
I think we have today a growing awareness of the existence of conversion therapies, because many people think, does that still exist? And also of the harmful consequences of conversion therapies, most of which are basically processes of torture related to the LGBT community. And I think that awareness is already bringing some member states, it was the case recently of Portugal, to ban conversion therapies. Of course, there's a big difference between legislating about it and implementing the legislation we just approved. But we would like to have discussed in the next term and over the next LGBT strategy, a European-wide ban on conversion therapies.
Right.
It's not healthcare, it's not acceptable, and it has tragic consequences.
Yeah. So after the vote then, what about the next steps? What demands from this report do you think will be taken forward, or what would be your priority for immediately after to advance it?
So the implementation report has as a main focus the objective of having a new LGBT strategy, and one that is more ambitious in its objectives, but also and especially much more concrete in its instruments. I mean, it's not just about saying these are a bunch of things that we are interested in and that are important for the LGBT community. We need to have specific goals, also measurable goals. We need to have targets. We need to have specific policy instruments, and including legal instruments. And this means having targets at the European level and also at the national level. And finally, it means having institutional instruments. That's why we're proposing to have a coordinator for LGBT policies within the portfolio of equality and diversity. And also we want to make sure that that portfolio is going to continue to exist in the future commission, which is something that is far from granted.
Right, like a commissioner for equality and diversity. Right. Okay, that's it. Okay, obrigado, camarada José.
That's very good.
We're going to let you go now and continue your important work. Thanks for watching. You can, of course, stay up to date with our work for People and Planet on all our social media platforms and on our website, left.eu. Thanks for watching. Cheers.